Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to be flying out the F5E FCU, which is a new squadron vehicle that came out in the last major update for Japan. And straight off the bat, I think I gotta say this is probably the new best PvP aircraft as far as squadron vehicles go. It's the standard F5E flight model, which is already a very strong flight model for its battle rating. This thing does sit at 11.3 instead of 11.0, but the reason for that is because this thing gets 4 missiles instead of the 2 AIM-9Js that the F5E gets. Now, the missiles that this thing gets specifically are AIM-9P4s, which are, as far as I can tell, pretty much exactly the same as the AIM-9J, except they're all aspect, which means you can fire them in head-on. And then you also get a set of Python 3s, which is very similar to, like, performance-wise to something like an AIM-9L, except it's a bit faster and it pulls a bit more Gs. Obviously, as you can see, the gameplay here is in the simulated game mode, because that's what I mainly focus on this channel, so everything that I'm going to talk about this plane is going to be in the context of the sim game mode and not RB. But anyway, we've talked about the weapon systems, we've mentioned the flight performance as well. What about the avionics on this thing? Well, first of all, the radar is absolute trash. It's you only get a standard pulse mode. It only goes up to, I think, about 40 kilometers, 40 miles or something like that. And that's even if it does, you know, pick. I'm not too certain if it can actually pick things up at that kind of distance. Nor would it really make a difference because you don't get any radar-guided missiles, neither do you get any IFF or anything like that, which is obviously a very important thing for sim because you always, you know, with the lack of markers and everything, having a radar that can identify friendlies for you can be very beneficial, and this plane just kind of lacks that, whereas most planes around this battle rating tend to have that feature in their radars. So what do you do in this case? Well, you leave the radar off at all times to stop yourself from being a giant beacon attracting enemies from all around the map. And you just go off of your RWR, because the RWR on this thing is in fact the modernized Western style RWR, which tells you exactly what's locking you and exactly how far away it is, and that is going to be your main tool in order to find enemies. Now, the F5 has always been like a very sort of visually driven plane anyway. Like, you have to fly it very visually, you have to look out of the cockpit, you don't really rely on your avionics too much. But with the RWR buff that we've had, or the RWR change that we've had a couple months ago now, this thing is really, it's really got an upgrade to its situational awareness with that, and it really does help the plane out. The standard F5E, of course, as well, but this plane especially, just because you do get those all-aspect missiles, so you find yourself in a lot more head-ons and stuff where you can engage people as they're actually pointing their radar at you. So that does make a big difference. Couple that with the tiny size of this plane as well. It's a very, very small visual profile. If you stay low to the ground, especially on certain maps that have like kind of like a weird ground texture, you can actually sort of stay hidden out of sight for quite a. You can get quite close to people and they still won't see you just because you're actually so tiny, and that is a very, it makes the F5 a very, very sneaky plane to play. However, when you do get found, you do possess the flight performance to actually outmaneuver pretty much, well, not anything, but almost anything at this kind of bracket. Today we're going to be flying the 11.7 bracket, by the way, so we're going to be going up against F-14As and Mirage 2000 S5s, by the way. So as you can see, I did just merge with an F-14 and an F-4. I did end up shooting down one of the F-4s. The F-14 has dumped all of its speed for some reason, so I'm just going to end up like sort of sitting above him here, because I know he can't really pull the nose up. And there's also a F-4 around looking at me. As you see, he's just trying to climb up there. But I have so much energy at this point. The F5's really, really good at sort of like maintaining its speed in a turn. It's not too amazing at low speeds, it's not terrible either, but you don't really want to get low speed around something like a Mirage 2000 or something for obvious reasons. When you're fighting stuff like Phantoms, obviously it's almost like no competition. The Phantoms can basically rate fight, they can go around in a circle if they kind of know what they're doing, but they're not really gonna, I mean, a Phantom isn't gonna outrate you in this thing, right? You're not gonna get out dogfought by a Phantom no matter how good the pilot is. F-14s can give you a good run for your money if the F-14 pilot knows what he's doing and he puts his wings out, because the F-14 does outrate the F-5. However, you know, you let me know when you find an F-14 pilot that actually knows what they're doing at this kind of battle rating. The guns on the F-5 are also kind of weird, by the way, so just, you know, cut me some slack for those, like, a bunch of shots that I just missed there. But you can see on the RWR now, we're actually getting engaged by the Mirage 2000. Now, the Mirage 2000 you want to be kind of careful with. If it's like the average, like sort of Mirage 2000 pilot that, I don't know, like maybe they're flying the Event Mirage or something, they don't really have a handle on the plane, you can actually, you can perform quite well. You can give them a really good run for their money, and if you know what you're doing, if you maintain your speed in this thing, if you stay above 400 knots or 830 kilometers an hour, right, between 800 and 900 kilometers an hour is like the optimum like maneuvering speed for this thing. You maintain your speed, you can give them a real good run for their money, like I said, because the Mirage isn't amazing at maintaining its energy in a turn, right? It's very good at making quick, tight turns at low speed, but when it comes to actually maintaining its turn rate, essentially, the F5 sort of can kind of compete with it, and that's how you have to end up playing it. Now obviously this guy didn't really know what he was doing there. If he did, I probably would have struggled quite a bit. The F5 isn't amazing. It can kind of keep up with the Mirage in a rate fight, right, but that's it basically. When it comes to like vertical maneuvers, when it comes to like thrust to weight ratio and stuff, the Mirage obviously just like completely has it. So let's not get ahead of ourselves here. But against the average like, Mirage pilot that you run into, you actually do stand a pretty good chance in this thing. Now, Gaijin didn't give me this plane. I've actually had to get it myself, and which means I had to spade it myself, which means I've been playing it for the last 2 days, trying to basically get it ready for the video. And one thing I've noticed with this as well is, like, I know most of you are going to say, like, well, duh, but it's not a very good interceptor. And why I think this is relevant is because in the simulated game mode, there's a lot of people that start maps like Tunisia or Denmark or Sinai or whatever, and they take off with a full bomb load, fly to the other end of the map, drop the bombs, and then just fly back kind of thing, just in order to get points. This is a very popular in sim because obviously there's no markers or anything like that, so they're generally quite hard to find. This isn't really an issue if you have an F-16 or just an EJ Kai or something with a good radar. And potentially radar missiles, because you can generally find them and pick them off pretty easily, right? They're bombers essentially. However, the F5 doesn't really have a good radar, and while it has a good RWR, most bombers don't really benefit from having their radars on, so they just leave them off most of the time, which means your RWR is not going to make you any noise. And then if you do end up finding someone that is bombing, in most cases you're not even going to be able to catch them, because either you're only going to be like slightly faster than them, or if it's something like a Phantom, I think even a Phantom with a full bomb load can possibly outrun the F5 actually if it's on full burner. So I just think this is worth mentioning because there is a lot of these Zomba lobbies and you can't necessarily always avoid them in sim, especially around this kind of battle rating, because this is where all the, generally where all the premium jets are sort of located at. And I just think that if you're going to be spending like 3 months sort of waiting to unlock this thing, or maybe even spend a bunch of money in order to get it straight away, then I just think this is something that you need to know. When it comes to those like Zomba lobbies or whatever, this can be a very frustrating plane to fly. Now it's also worth mentioning as well, because this is obviously not a premium plane, so it has to abide by all of the same rules that all of the other tech tree vehicles have to abide by when it comes to actually unlocking the tech tree. And if I'm not mistaken, this plane sits at rank 7, so anything below rank 6 you're not really going to be able to research with this thing. So this is just information for you if you are thinking about getting this thing and you don't have the Japanese tech tree yet. You're not going to be able to research the entire tech tree with this. That is something that it gets over. Like, I hear this like from people like all the time as well. Like they buy like an aircraft, like a squadron vehicle or something off the marketplace or an event vehicle or whatever, really excited to fly it, and then sort of use it as like a kind of like a makeshift premium. But even if you put a talisman on it, you cannot research lower tiers or anything. I mean, you know how the ranking system works, but yeah, just in this case, that is something that you should also think about if you're thinking about getting this thing without having the Japanese tech tree. On a more positive note though, one thing I love about the F5s in this game is that if you fly them correctly, they basically have infinite energy, right? This means that they're very good at sort of dealing with multiple people, and at this kind of battle rating where most planes don't really have missiles with IRCCM or anything, you can actually flare off most missiles. The F5E also has an incredibly low heat signature from the engines. You do only get 45 flares, but they drop it individually, and like I said, you get the low heat signature from the engine, so 1 flare, at most 2 flares, is generally enough to flare off like any kind of missile. You do have to be a little bit careful with the Mirages, with the Magic 2s, like I said, because they do get the IRCCM, and the Magic 2's been buffed this patch as well. That's a whole nother, like, the missile basically turns like twice as much now. So that's the one thing you need to be a little bit careful of, but just in general, like, if you're fighting Phantoms, AIM-9Js, R60s, stuff like that, they're going to be flared off with like 1 or 2 flares. So you really can hold down like a furball. This is a very good plane for those like furball lobbies. You can just get in there, dump out a flare every like second or two, just stay in like a continuous turn or whatever, and you can just run people out of energy. And this is what the F5, like this is what the playstyle for the F5E has always been. The F5C as well, which is by the way like one of my favourite planes for sim as well. It's not quite as brain dead to fly something like an F-16 or a Gripen or whatever, but that's kind of good though, because if you do manage to sort of you know, fly the thing correctly, stay at your optimum speed, which isn't like too difficult to do as well, but it's not like some major feat or anything like that. But it gives you like a very rewarding feeling, and it genuinely makes you feel like you're better than the other guy, even if they are only in like a little poor Mirage Free or something like that, right? Now I don't really play the ground modes in this game, but you do get 4 AGM-65Bs with this thing as well, and as far as I can tell, I think that's something that Japan is kind of like, Japan are kind of lacking like smart ammunition around the level 3 as well, especially when it comes to, you know, like air to ground casts and stuff. So that may make it worth it for you as well. I just thought I'd mention that. Obviously you can see all the loadouts in the tech trees as well yourselves. But apart from that, guys, I was in this lobby for like 1.5 hours and I was getting a little bit like bored and had some stuff to do, so I did end up like actually leaving. Final score was about 20-1 with one, +1 was it like the severe damage thing, assist or whatever that is. But yeah, it was a pretty good score. I was pretty happy with it, and it's a pretty good plane. I think it's definitely worth it, even if you have the Japanese tech tree or you just like F5s in general. I mean, this is the best F5 in the game right now, apart from the F20, obviously. But yeah, apart from that, guys, the link to my sim-orientated Discord server is in the description. If you're interested in joining that, we'd love to have you. If you have any questions about my control setups, I do have a control setup video as well on my channel somewhere. You just got to look for it. And yeah, apart from that, guys, I hope to see you in the next video. And yeah, cheers for watching.